Man, that's some pretty funky stuff right there. So live it is. This is Brad. Thank you again for checking out the Main Stage Music weekly live stream. You know, we were doing the math, and this is our 48th episode in a row. Haven't missed a one. Not a single week has been missed. And man, we're not going to do it. We're gonna do every single live stream all of 2021. It's going to be epic. So, but anyways, I am Brad. I'm your host. And of course, today you might think, hey, wait a minute. Where's Jamie at? Well, he had a scheduling conflict. He is doing a family event and couldn't make it tonight. So I thought, hey, what better time to have a guest Zoomer. Okay, so we have the ability using technology to actually Zoom people, transport them, if you will, from one side of Tennessee to another side, really all over the world. So today I thought I would bring on Mr. Matt Jones. Hey, there he is. Look at that. All the way from the land of Cleveland, Tennessee. How you doing, Matt?
Living the dream down here in, the deep South from Dayton.
The deep South. Actually, yeah, you are more of a southern, locale than Dayton, kind of south east. So there's that, right? But anyways, just to kind of talk about what we were, getting into today. So I was inspired, if you will, by a post that Matt made on Facebook. He basically said, you got too many pedals on your pedal board. Now, of course, he likes to speak in riddles and jesting and stuff because that's the language of the internet, okay? But, I often thought there sure are a lot of effectors, a lot of pedals, and really has been that way. I'm going to say it really went nuts in the 1990s, okay? But before that even, there was quite a few different choices when it came to ways of affecting your sound, going all the way back to the 1950s with the D'Armond tremolo unit, which we've talked about in previous episodes. And hey, if you were around back in the early 60s, you may have even heard the little demonstration record that came with the fuzz tone unit by Maestro or Gibson, where you could sound like a tuba or sound like a bass with your fuzz effector pedal. But really in the 70s, when things started kind of really opening up for different manufacturers, something changed in the 80s where they were like, this is cool that we've got all these pedals, but this is too much stuff to haul around. It's confusing. I mean, trying to get So hence the multi-effect revolution, if you will started. The first multi-effect pedal that I ever saw, okay, was made by Ibanez. It was called the UE305, and it had three of the most popular Ibanez 9 series effects built into one gold steel box. It had like a TS9 and a chorus, and they also made another one called the UE300, which I think had like a delay and a compressor and whatever. But they were effectively just 3 effect pedals in one box unit. Do you remember seeing any of those, Matt? Have you ever seen one of those units before?
I've seen them.
Oh, yeah.
I know what you're
now, another really cool piece of gear. Now, I've never seen one of these things with my own eyeballs, okay? The photon energy of this unit has never made it to my brain stem. And that was actually by Boss. So really, I looked into this, and technically, some people could argue that the first real, like by modern standards, multi-effect unit was actually invented by Boss. And it was called like the SCC 700. And what it was, brilliant piece of gear. Came out in the early 1980s, I think 81 or 2. You could hook up to 7 effects. Now, of course, they ideally wanted you to put Boss effects on there. Not like there was tons of choices in the early 80s, but and it had a little sequencer computer that you could set the gain levels of individual pedals. You could set the arrangement of which effect came before other effects. and then using a separated foot switch, which it was tethered by like a multi-pin cable, you could push a button and boom, have the chorus and the overdrive on at the same time. Push another button that you'd save, and you could, but you had 7 different autonomous pedals that you could arrange using this little sequencer unit, okay, on a pedal board, however you wanted, and set different gain levels and so on. Way ahead of its time. Pretty rare unit, and rare usually means that it was unpopular. So in other words, way ahead of its, people didn't understand what this thing was at the time. But effectively what it was evolved into what we now know as the MultiEffect pedal. Okay, so in other words, they knew that there would be a demand for players to have a lot of different effects arranged in different ways to suit their needs in one compact and easy to tote around unit, which that's where we are today. I mean, it's gone back and forth. So I think after that unit, it didn't sell very well. And I think that Roland came out with, which is Roland Boss's same thing, but branded Roland, was called the GP8, which was actually a single rack unit that they used digital boards to, craft all these effects. And then you used MIDI to trigger these effects. And that pretty much was the 1980s. They loved those rack effects. A lot of pedal manufacturers didn't even really survive much of the 80s. But have you ever played any of those those early multi-effect units, Matt, or seen them or any of this stuff?
No, I mean, I'm a couple moons younger than you, so I was born in 1990. So for me, I mean, my early experience with multi-effect units, I mean, I remember when the Line 6 Pod Beam came out, like the OG Beam, and that was a big deal.
Yeah, it still is. It's a pretty cool unit.
I remember getting Musician's Friend catalogs in the mail, and people were frothing at the mouth over the Beam. And then I remember when the Line 6 HD 500 came out. That was kind of a seminal unit, and it was a big deal. I know that I'm going back to my youth group kid days, but Lincoln Brewster was a huge proponent of that unit, and actually he, all of his albums from the 2000s were recorded only with that unit, totally direct to the board, and they're incredible tones, great tones. And going back to the Line 6 Pod, I know that Pete Anderson uses that as his whole rig now, even still now to these days.
Oh, yeah.
So some of those are pretty good. I remember the first one that I bought was a Digitech RP500. That was a unit that I played a lot in college. Got a lot of use out of it. I actually still have it. It's still going strong. It's built. You could literally detonate a grenade on it, and
they are built tough. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't really my thing. But some of those early ones I know, and it's interesting too that you're talking about it because I'm into vintage keyboards as well, and just hearing you talk about some of these early 80s things, I wonder how much of an influence, especially with Roland, that keyboard sounds had on that, because really you see built-in effects in keyboards really early as well. So the DX7 from Yamaha, the SY77, you really start to see a pretty robust, chorus, delay, reverb package. Now they're all very dated now. They don't sound very good, but I wonder how much that had to do with it as well.
Well, effects in the 1970s, I would say you had a fairly decent amount of, obviously, guitar players using them. But a lot of the most valuable effects of the 1970s, I mean, buzzwords that a lot of people may have heard of but never actually seen, so things like the Mutron series of products and whatnot, they weren't even really designed with guitar players in mind as much as keyboard players. So like when you listen to, oh, hey, there's the Chattanooga Choo Choo for all y'all again. Regular watchers are used to hearing, that train. Anyways, so yeah, when you listen to songs like, anything with a Rhodes piano, okay? So think of like King Harvest Dancing in the Moonlight, or think of anything Stevie Wonder did off the Songs in the Key of Life album, or, I mean, that's not what a Rhodes piano sounds like. I mean, right out of they sound great. I'm a huge Rhodes fan. Anyone who walks into main stage knows that, because they're like, what is this old thing? Like, it's a Rhodes, and I'm sorry, So a lot of phaser pedals, a lot of that stuff was not designed with guitar players in mind. So, and even today, I think that it's a little pretentious of guitar players to think that the entire world of effects revolves around what we do, especially knowing that effects like the wah-wah pedal had a trumpet player in mind. So I mean, something that's so synonymous with was really not even really designed with a guitar player in mind. So I mean, but that being said, like there's some Boss effects, like one that I know that you've had, the DC2, okay, by Boss, really is a great sounding chorus pedal. But that, even the interface of that thing coincides with a lot of the keyboard chorus effects. Oh, there it is. Look at you. Killer pedal. But a lot of those chorus effects coincide with keyboard, built-in digital keyboard choruses, okay, at the time. So like if you've got an old Juno 106 or something, and I think there was also a company, music group or whatever, that copied the chorus sound on a Juno and actually came out with a pedal they called the June.
The T-Tronic, I think.
Yeah, that's, and but the key is that, so really early on, okay, they knew that, hey, they're going to want this and they're going to want this, and man, I'll tell you what, it's enough gear already to be hauling around. How about we tighten this up for these guys and try to pack things in? So like when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, as far as the guitar scene, Musician's Friend was around back then, and they used to have these contests where, like, if you sign up now, you could win this mega road rig or whatever. And it was never a bunch of pedals. It was a rack, okay? And in that rack, you'd have all the different effects, and, Marshall even made a rack-mounted power amp series, okay, tube. And so that was what the pros were using, was multi-effect rack units. And it wasn't really until Nirvana and that whole grunge scene of the early 1990s where things kind of went, I don't want to use the word backwards, but to someone who was there at the time, they would think, why are we going back to kind of 20-year-old technology when we got all this stuff right here at our fingertips? But man, I have to say, having all these different effects now, I mean, because it really got everybody wood shedding. You've got, obviously Boss was always the king. That's what Kurt Cobain used. He used DS1s, DS2s, electro harmonics, these old school pedals, because he could get them cheap. The sounds were great though. I mean, they're iconic. I mean, anybody who grew up in that era, that was our sound. It wasn't, so, there's obviously a pendulum here. We had the technology, but it kind of went backwards, okay? But in that, it crafted this whole boutique pedal thing. Now, by the late 90s, when the Pod came out, they were like, okay, you like the simplicity of knobs and whatever, but, we're kind of past this. Let's come out with this awesome all-in-one box that gives you some great amp models that we've developed and some great effects in a very compact unit. And I think JHS, Josh Smith, actually just did a whole little video on this, and he's a boutique pedal guy, and about the Line 6 Pod. So, now I have to say that the Line 6 Pod, though, and some multi-effect units among some characters, kind of, it's a little bit of a touchstone topic. Some people just, I guess it's the product these guys love to hate. Okay? Now, what would you say your opinion is on things like that? I mean, do you like multi-effect pedals or the concept of it, or?
For me, here's my thing. It's a paintbrush, it's a tool hanging on the wall, right? I mean, I'm a younger guy, but I'm kind of an old fogey, right? I mean, I'm 31, but I got boomer taste, right? You see it. I mean, I've got a 73 Deluxe Reverb. I've got a Les Paul, right? I mean, that's what I'm into, and I like a smaller pedal board. That being said, I mean, I'm kind of just doing. I'm at a point in my life where I can just sound like me, right? I don't have to sound really like anybody else, and I can just do what I want to do. and not have to constantly, feel the burden of having to sound like this person or that person, or, in a straight up cover band or in a worship environment or what have you. But I will tell you, I mean, I have been, there was a series of years there where I was actually playing in a show choir band. And it was a show. I mean, show choir is a big deal, and they had a live band. And part of the, we would go to these competitions, and it would be like maybe a 14 or 15 minute set. And part of the way that you were graded was how quickly that you could set up. So you would literally have maybe like a 15-minute set, and you would have 17 minutes total on stage, and you would get ding points for how much you went over. So we would literally, as the band, I'm talking drum kit, everything, full guitar, everything, we would have like 34 seconds to set up. And in that environment, something like, which it hadn't come out yet, but something like an HX Stomp would be an incredible lifesaver. What I actually ended up doing for that gig was I had a Fender Super Champ XD, which I still think is one of the most underrated amps of all time. And I would just carry that around, and I would literally have 2 cables in my guitar in my Super Champ with cables looped through, and I would run out, and we'd throw the cable. We'd look like a Japanese firefighter, right? Like throwing the hose, we're throwing the cables out, throwing the snakes across the stage. But if I had an HX Stomp, I would use that all day long because it would be so much easier. So I think there's specific examples for it, but for me, I don't enjoy them. I don't like them. They're a utility product for me. They don't spark joy for me. I would much rather have a single pedal that does something really good. I mean, in terms of it depends on your definition of a multi-effect, right? Like like a Strymon Flint, that's technically a multi-effect, but it's simple in what it does extremely well. A Strymon Deco, that's technically a multi-effect, but within the context of a tape deck, the effects that can spring from that. But it does what it does extremely well, and it's all very tangible. I just hate menu diving. That's my whole thing. I hate menu diving. I don't find it gratifying at all. Some people get really rock hard about the technical aspect of playing electric guitar, and for me, it kind of defeats the purpose. I mean, for me, electric guitar is a visceral, almost animalistic kind of thing. It's rock and roll, baby, and we just got, it's getting to the point where you have to have a computer degree to try and figure some of this stuff out. And I've gone through the whole thing, right? I mean, because I used to play in church a lot, and we went silent stage, which a lot of guys have to deal with. And I did the fractal route. I had an AX8 for a while, recorded an album with my church actually with that, and it sounded fine, but it never felt right to me. I had an HX Stomp. I had a Strymon Iridium until finally we were able to just get it back to where I was able to run a cable down to an amp in a box, which was, I was always right with the world again. But yeah, I'm just not really, and back to your original comment, Brad, I mean, about the post that I made, it wasn't necessarily in the context of multi-effects. It was more of, I think there's in general a trend of gear porn where people try and like just pack as many pedals as they possibly can on a pedal board. And I'm not into that. I think the only person that I know of that actually sounds good who does that is Tom Yukovac. And that's because he has to have so many different sounds in a session or something like that. I can excuse that. But even him.
You can't. What about the Edge? Come on.
I'm not an Edge guy. Not
what?
An Edge guy.
You don't
really.
like U2? Oh my goodness. Oh wow.
Here's and I'm going to make a controversial statement here. Everything people cite the Edge as being a very influential guitar player, and I would say that's true.
Musician.
But everything that is influential about the Edge, Andy Summers did first and better.
No, I mean, and I'll tell you, it's like, but you don't listen to the Police and think, oh, that sounds a lot like U2. I mean, it's not even close. They're 2 different bands. Okay, now getting back to what you were saying though, and I think that you sedged away right into something that I try to tell customers all the time when they come in the store. People tend to lump pedals, whether they be individual, boxes, right? The stuff that we all know and love, and multi-effect pedals into the same family. And see, that's not fair, okay? Because that's like lumping anything like food or drink into the same thing. It's not. Milk and whiskey will never be used in the same type of situation. And so the same with effects, like you had mentioned that it's a tool, okay, paint brushes and so on and so forth. So just like with tools, there are tools for, let's just say, some guy who just wants to tighten a screw on a cabinet at his house, and then a contractor, right? So, I mean, you have stuff where a guy has specific needs. It needs to be a certain level of being rugged. It has to have certain features that appeal to him. And then some people who just need some general interest type of tools, okay? So, and in the world of music as players, and we were all there, okay? I know that when we're at certain levels, we like to think, oh, I never, had to learn how to tune a guitar. Yes, you did, okay? If you play, we all started somewhere. And so with effects, it's that same way. Now, first of all, I want to thank some people who are commenting already. We welcome your comments. We want you to get on the conversation, share this, blah, 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 blah. Stephen West chimed in. He goes, his first effects unit was an ART rack unit around 1990. ART is still around, by the way. And man, I'll tell you, had that hot pink kind of font on it and stuff. It was pretty legit. And he goes, menu diving gives me option paralysis. Now I don't pretend to be a psychologist that completely understands that term, but I need the simplicity of a few stomp boxes. First of all, I think a lot of us can agree, and I think what Matt was saying, okay, if I'm understanding correctly, if I'm not, feel free to correct me, is that when it's a craft, okay, playing music is a craft, and especially with guitar, how you hold the string, how you hold the pick, how you pinch the pick against the string, okay? There's so many different nuanced ways of playing the instrument, okay? That then when you additionally add how your amp is set up, and then additionally add, what effects you might choose to accentuate your sound, every layer of complexity takes away from you focusing on what you're playing. And even if that focus is on just looking comfortable and smiling and winking at that girl in the front row or whatever it happens to be, unless you're in church, right, man? I don't know. But I mean, maybe, so I me too. So, I mean, that being said, though, I understand the idea of keep it simple, stupid, right? So that being said, we're all super familiar with like pedals, right? Okay, so at a certain point you go, okay, well, I just need a trem pedal, okay? That's all I need, just this trem pedal. Well, and then this univibe pedal, it's all I need, just this trem pedal and this univibe pedal. That's all I need. Oh, a delay. I couldn't possibly be without that. Oh, wait a minute. Overdrive pedal. I need, before you know it, it starts sounding like Steve Martin at the end of The Jerk, where he's basically wandering down the street with his pants down and he's holding all this garbage, And at a certain point, when you look at a pedal board that's just a bunch of multi-effects, and they go, I love the simplicity of this pedal board. There's only 184 knobs and a bunch of, routing and blah, 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 blah. You're like, is it really then that simple? Now, that being said, they have guys who say, well, let's design a pedal that's a multi-effect pedal that can operate in a way for these guys that's simple. It's knob-based. There's no menus. There's none of that stuff. So, I've set up a cool little camera to show people some stuff. So let me show you the first one that I brought with me that I thought was an excellent example of a pedal that doesn't have menus, okay? That just works like, let me see here. There we go. That just works like effectively a handful of your favorite pedals in one, okay? This is made by Boss, the ME80. And honestly, the ME80 is very similar to one of the very first effect pedals ever made, and that is the UE models. So effectively, you just have 4 effect pedals and a wah, all right? And the 4 effect pedals, you simply choose by picking what, so in this case, this is compression, this is overdrive, distortion, modulation, that's your swirly stuff. And then you got your delay. Completely separate is reverb, equalizer, preamp. This would be kind of like what Matt was talking about with the silent stage, for people who have not heard that term. That effectively means that we're not going to have a bunch of amplifiers on stage, which effectively gives you a competition for who's going to be loudest. Okay? It allows the sound guy to adjust the volume up and down and then control what the audience hears a lot cleaner than having to worry about, okay, keep him way in the back because he loves to bring that really loud amplifier. So with a pedal like this that just has a handful of knobs, you effectively just choose the 4 pedals you want, and you turn them off and on when you need them. Okay, so now some of the pedals that you were referring to, it's kind of like the Flint by Strymon and some other pedals. I know that JHS actually makes quite a few different multi-effects. Okay, but they make them, or they're just variants of the same pedal. Okay, potato. I mean, I don't know. It's still a multi-effect. So
I think there's cause for like some semantic distinction there, because some of like the multi muffs or the multi rats that JHS does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, it's still a rat, right? I mean, it's still a rat. I mean, another one that I'll reference. This is a company from Indonesia.
Yeah, those are
GFI.
cool.
You could technically call this a multi-pedal, but it's really just 4 different delays. But it's in a single enclosure. So it's a digital delay, a tape delay, and like 2 really kind of modulated spacey delays.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have 4 knobs and a very tiny. There's really no menu dial, maybe a little, but it's not like an HX Stomp.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Another thing that people go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so that's very similar to kind of what the Boss is doing here. So like on their delay thing, it is a single knob, kind of like that just selects different types, analog, tape, reverse, whatever, delay, and then just the normal 3 knobs that any delay pedal would have. And of course they have that with all their different, whether it's overdrive, compression, modulation, so on. I guess the key is that this pedal is not designed for a guy who only wants variants of one effect. It's kind of like I'm a professional, so I want something, because it's very heavily built too. It's like heavy 12 gauge steel. It's powder coated. I mean, it's very well made. And just the features that it has is it's not designed. It's designed for someone who's going to be more rugged with it, who doesn't like the idea of menus. So this is just one variant of that. Now, another product that Boss has come out with that again is similar to what we're talking about is the 200 series. Okay, so now I only brought one of them, but they have a series of these. Now this is called the OD 200. Okay, now the OD 200 is just a bunch of variants of overdrive distortions. Okay, and it is knob based. There's no menus on this. All right, so you simply just choose the overdrive style sound that you want here, and there's things as varied as Tube Screamer, Klon Centaur. They even have fuzz on here, and then of course you just have your normal knobs that you would adjust a distortion pedal with.
Also just want to say we actually got a YouTube comment from
Cool.
once. Howie Hill says ME80 is ridiculous bang for the buck.
So yeah, thanks Howie for commenting, and we obviously welcome our YouTube viewers as well. The ME80 is a pretty so just so people know, it's $300. Okay, $300 for the ME80, and anyone who's priced a Boss pedal before, I mean the average price of a pedal is about $100. If you talking delay, it's like 150. So it's effectively like buying 2, maybe 3 if you're gonna be real liberal about the price, like buying 3 effects, or you can literally get all of the, and they're Boss effects, not so now getting back to I guess what you're talking about, the differentiation of multi-effects. I mean, you're right, there is some semantics here. Okay, and I think that which is exactly the conversation that I wanted to have. Okay, so can you have a multi-effect board using products that are effectively just different brands of multi-effects? I mean, that's kind of what you're doing, right? You've got that Orca delay modeler, and oh, look at this, I love it.
Well, I mean, this is what I'm using nowadays, and the internet works for me. But I mean, technically, you could technically say that all 4 of these pedals are multi-effects, but they're all single pedals. So I mean, this is the Pulp and Peel V4.
Yep, that's a great compressor. Love it.
Love it. I mean, and I use it as I play bass a lot too. I use this as my direct box for bass. It's a distortion pedal too if I need it, a boost. I mean, this is a killer. I love this pedal. This is a Love Pedal, Church of Tone, Kanji Eternity special edition pedal. It's a doubler. This is a weird one. I got it in a trade. I didn't even know it existed, but I love it. It's become one of my favorite pedals. And then obviously the Flint.
Mm-hmm.
I've sold 2 of these, and this is my 3rd one. And sometimes I think about selling it, but I just know I'll buy another one, so I just never sold it.
Exactly.
And this is a V2 Dispatch Master, which I was using the Orca. I also had a Greer, what's it called? A Greer Black Tiger that I was using.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom Bukovac, I keep on bringing it. He's probably my favorite guitar player right now. Him and Larjo Metz and a couple of these other Nashville guys, and this just adds a sheen, but it's a reverb and a delay too. But it's all, there's no menus, so there is a via media, if you will, a middle path that, and that's kind of where I've gone. But this is really all I need, right? I mean, if I need something else, I'll add it, right? So if I'm going to a gig where I need a chorus, then I'll add a chorus pedal, right? I just don't. The thing that drives me crazy is like, why build a board that big if you're really not going to need it all the time? And I came from, I'm not a praise and worship guitar player. I just was a rock and roll guitar player that happened to play in church for 10 years.
Sure.
But the worship crowd is, they are crazy about it. I mean, you look at some of their boards and they're just, it's like the space shuttle is less complex. And I think, you talked about the idea of freedom or creativity. And there's a certain point where it's like, am I even playing the guitar anymore? Right. I watched really great, the Rick Beato video with Tommy Emmanuel the other day. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to me, he goes, I have one pedal on stage and it's a tuner, and everything else I do with my hands, and I'm thinking about, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I do that, just plug straight into an amp, and it's very freeing because you're thinking about, that's really what I'm trying to get to. With my pedal setup, it's really about utility and not necessarily, some guys view a pedal board as a creative engine, mm-hmm. which it can be, but for me, that's not really what I'm about, right? I mean, for me, it can be an obstacle, especially if I'm having to, tap dance to get to my next preset, or,
Sure.
if I have to time hitting 2 buttons at the same time before I go from Rosanna to the Pina Colada song or whatever. I mean, mm-hmm. So it's, it's just not for me. I would rather have a couple sounds that sound good and just roll with that.
So now here is you've mentioned a few times, so might as well just tell people about it. So this is the famed Helix Stomp, or the HX Stomp. Garçon, camera, please. There we go. And so the HX Stomp is just a very, I'm going to use the word simple. It's deceptively simple. In other words, that it looks simple, but it's very complex, okay? But the HX Stomp is, goodness, what does it not have? I mean, it's part of the Helix family of brands, and Helix, of course, is a very well-marketed and well-regarded line that the current people at Line 6 have worked on. And I don't think anyone's ever going to complain about the sound. I mean, the sound of these is phenomenal. I mean, it's got extremely high processing power. And you might think processing power. Yeah, I mean, this is microchips. I mean, so when you, Strymon was founded by a couple of guys who used to work at a microchip factory. So, I mean, this is a microchip product. And so the more microchips you have and the higher the processing power, the more complex and the more realistic these sounds can be. And I shouldn't use the word realistic. Real as to what? In other words, just the more defined they can be. So it's like listening to a CD for the first time after only knowing tapes, okay? It's like, whoa, I didn't know that could exist. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the, like when these Big Sky pedals and Time Machine pedals and all this stuff started coming out, we're hearing these effects going, whoa, I've never heard such a, ethereal tone. I mean, it's like these ambient tones that are being created to stuff that I'd never heard before those. And that's because they could only be heard with these ridiculously expensive products made back in, let's say, the 90s that were $3,800, if you could even, imagine that back in those days, made by companies like Eventide and so on. But now the processing power has come down, where for $500-600 you can get these effects if you use them. I mean, obviously, it's not necessarily my style of music, but Matt was mentioning like the worship market. And it's not just worship, but the other markets, they want these real immersive reverb and delay combinations where you just sound like you're going from Crystal Palace crazy, whatever. It's pretty amazing stuff if you're into that. But with the processing power of these things, it's incredible. I mean, you can do it. Now, I would say the direct competitor to the HX line of stuff is Boss, of course. They make their GT1000 line. Okay, here's a picture of that. And the GT1000 line technically is a higher processing power than the Line 6 stuff. I think that the reason you don't hear about the GT1000 as much as the Line 6, personally, I think it's because it doesn't have a color screen. I know that sounds really stupid, but everyone who's ever demoed one of these things in the store kind of universally agrees that the GT1000 sounds better. I mean, there's like, wow. I mean, it's just like more defined. It's crispier. It's just, but it doesn't have a color screen. It's a very bright LCD, but it's not color. And so I think the HX kind of wins on that aspect of it right there. But again, it's, as far as the processing power and editing and so on, it's actually very similar in regard to the HX Stomp, and that you have the little chain of pedals that you can pop in and out. And so once you get...
Brad, we're talking about Boss products. I mean, and this is straight up the truth. And if this product existed when I was a younger man, I mean, I just would have been beside myself. But I think the best multi-effect product that you can buy for, $400 is a Boss Katana Mark II 100-watt amp. I mean, I mean, and I'll tell you, the Katana is a solid seller. I mean, it's a great amplifier.
I have one. Yeah, I mean, I use it. I mean,
yeah, I mean, they're great. I mean, we actually had the Katana on our show. I guess it would have been, we did like a whole Boss Roland amp shootout. So we had the Katana, the Blues Cube, the Next Tone, all here in the studio, and people got to see and hear it. And so if you guys can't remember that episode, just click back. It's only a few weeks ago, and you can kind of hear that. But no, it's a phenomenal product. Yeah, just great stuff. Now, in the same right, now we got other customers here too. I shouldn't call them customers, just players, right? So obviously you, and I'll have throw myself into this, and myself lump into a group of players that we'll say, I don't want to say less is more, but we know the effects we will use. We know the songs we're going to play. We know that maybe the tones or the songs we play don't have flanger in them, or don't have maybe even delay in them. It doesn't matter. So we just buy what we need, and then we stay in our lane as far as that's concerned. Am I fair in saying that that's kind of what we're talking about here? As far as like you and me, we don't need every effect on our board. We just get the ones that we like, and then try to figure out how to make it work with what we got.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the gig. I mean, again, I'm in a position right now where I'm just playing with a couple pickup bands and I play for my own enjoyment. And so I just sort of get to be me. But if I was going to join a Fish cover band or something, then okay, obviously I'm going to have to tailor my board a little bit for that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But so it's first of all, it's how much you're paying me, right? I mean, it's a trade, right? I mean, if you're paying me, if someone paid me and they were like, I need a straight up, Richie Sambora, vibe. It's like, okay, well then I'm going to go buy a JCM 800 or whatever. It's like, it just depends on that comes into play too. But if someone doesn't care, I mean, this is the thing that I always get on, and I talk to players about this too. The audience doesn't care. They don't care. We can get so zoomed in to the minuscule details. I mean, the thing that came into focus for me one time, I played a gig and I was like, man, I was killing it. My tone was just, and I was like, yeah, I probably had $10,000 of gear on the stage. And that's not a flex. It's just the truth. I mean, I had, it was a Dr. ZZ 28 amp. I had a larger board at the time. Had, a pretty nice Collins guitar on the stage. I mean, it was killing. And I was like, man, this is it. Like, these people knew what was up. And a lady came up to me and she told me that I was a great bass player. So they don't know, right? They don't know. Like, so if this person doesn't know a guitar from a bass, they're not thinking about
I have a very similar story. I used to bring, I mean, hey, guitar players, we all have this problem. Once we start liking this stuff, then we get a little manic. We start collecting all this stuff and amassing all this stuff. And then, of course, you get into a band and, I'm going to bring everything I need. And you bring all this stuff out there thinking that there is some, person out in that audience that's just like, oh, is that a JHS modded da-da-da pedal? Oh, is that a Roger Mayer Octavia limited edition? Oh, did you get the signed one? I mean, they don't care. They don't know. We played a gig one time where it was like I brought all this stuff and I didn't have normally to my gigs I used to bring all this stuff, but last minute we got this gig and I'm like, oh crap. I grabbed a Boss tuner, a Boss Super Overdrive, and a Boss chorus pedal through an AC30 one guitar and played it. Hands down, it was like the best gig we ever played. But again, it was like last minute and whatever, because to me, I was like so focused in on just playing and not focused in on tip tapping around and what's pedal layout did I use for this song and so on. But now in the same right, I'm almost admitting to being sloppy. In other words, admitting to being like, they don't know any better. At some point people go, well, we're a little more disciplined than that, or I put more work and time into the, and you know what? Hey, that's great. And I have to admit that if you go to any big show, whether it's Tom Bukovac or whether it's Brad Paisley or whoever, you're going to see racks of stuff, drawers with pedals and Bradshaw switchers that cost $20,000. I mean, just insane amounts of gear. But you walk away going, that was so perfectly produced. And it was. I mean, that's what they needed to get that thing. You can't tell me Joe Bonamassa doesn't bring an ungodly amount of stuff, but he's Joe Bonamassa. And everybody like, oh man, his tone. True. Absolutely true. And so, no one can tell someone else what is right for them and so on. And of course, different skill levels, different needs. I'm sure a lot of these players probably have something like this at home, or they use it in, whatever their shtick is. So now, okay, moving right along, okay, because I got a few extra little pieces here. So some people go, well, yeah, you guys are showing us a bunch of $1,000 items or whatever. My kid has been kind of bugging me. He's been playing guitar, started this summer, and we're thinking maybe I'll get him a neat gift to try to encourage him in his playing, or maybe, hey, I used to play in high school and now I'm not in high school no more. I want something to knock the rust off and just kind of, I'm not to the level where, I don't even understand what you guys are really even talking about. And I want to first of all apologize if we're talking in code or over anyone's head. So there are products for y'all, okay? So Boss, the company we were just talking about, made that kind of advanced pedal. They make this guy right here. It's called the GT1. Well, hey, one is a great place to start, right? So the GT1 is an extremely complex, advanced, and cool little board. Or I shouldn't say complex. I mean, it's a pretty simple board. You just kind of go up and down. You listen to a bunch of cool sounds. You can edit. You can do all sorts of stuff. Dude, this is only $200. So this pedal right here costs as less than a lot of single pedals do. And so now, not to be undone, this brand that we started carrying last year, that I have to say is kind of came out of nowhere, but has very quickly became one of the most, albeit odd for me to say, okay, most impressive lines that we've been carrying as of recent. It's called NUX, okay? And at first everybody goes, oh, Nux. I'm like, yeah, I guess I can see that. But it's actually NUX, okay? They're a tech product, okay? All they make is tech gear. We picked them up once TC Electronic made the decision that they only wanted to sell on Amazon or whatever. Like, yeah, they're so well known for their music store and customer service stuff. So they approached us, and we really dig their products, okay? They make this little guy right here. It's a full color screen. I know it doesn't look like, you know what? Hey, watch this. Let me see something here. I'm gonna be Mr. Fancy. Wonder if it's got a internal switch. Oh, look at that. So it's actually got a full color screen right here where you can actually pick different amp models and stuff like that. It's a pretty handy dandy little device. But the real cool feature about it is that it has a, for, let's say entry level players, it's got a jam function. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, Matt, but when I was younger, okay, you could only play Smoke on the Water so much by yourself, before you're kind of like, man, I kind of, and you wish you had a drummer or a bass player, at least another friend that could just keep playing, pumping an E while you worked on your blues licks, okay? And They didn't really have loopers back in those days, okay? There's a few, but they're very expensive, the Boomerang and whatever. So with this pedal, they actually build into it a looper and a full drum complement. So you can have different drum beats and a looper on top of that. So now you can, with good drums, okay, and they're sampled drum sounds, pump out a little line and actually work on your chops. Now, these are products right here that I know, you've been playing a long time. You have groups to play with. But, if this existed back in, the late 90s when you were coming up, you can't tell me that you wouldn't have loved something like this.
No, it would have been a great asset. Again, I was in the time where I was lucky enough to have, like when I first started playing guitar, around the first time I got a guitar, I also got an Xbox. And the
spoiled kid.
A feature of the OG Xbox is that you could rip CDs directly to it like a computer. And so you could have it was like an MP3 player, right? So you could have an entire library of CDs and you could make shuffle stuff. So that was kind of my thing, that I would rip I would have friends get me, because my parents were pretty strict too. I remember I had to beg, steal, and borrow to get the first Linkin Park CD. That was the real hot commodity around my middle school back in the day. And I would borrow a CD, upload it to my Xbox, and then I would learn those songs. But yeah, if I had something like that had sampled drums, or even like on YouTube nowadays where they have those jam tracks, just sit around. That would have been huge. Oh,
I know. Now, here's another. This is a new product, also by NuX, and this is their kind of big daddy model, if you will. Okay, and I have to say this is a pretty impressive piece of gear. Now, this directly goes up. It's a dual processor, so same as a HX Stomp. Okay. Dual processor, full color screen, actually a very similar layout to the block that the HX Stomp does. Processor. Now this one's actually being endorsed by and used by Pete Thorne, which is kind of a big deal. He's played in a lot of big groups and so on, and he actually has a lot of his own settings in this. But now the MG30 here, extremely high definition tones, full color screen, cool editing. This is one thing I thought was really cool about it. Okay, so you push the button here and you actually have real, these different amp models. They've built in 20 different amplifiers. Okay, and these are they also are, this is endorsed with by Eminence. Okay, so it actually has Eminence speaker cabinet IRs and so on. So it's a full IR player, and you can actually program other IRs into this. Okay, so you got like 20 additional IR. And what IR is for you guys is it's impulse response. It basically means cabinet emulator. So you can buy these different, like a pro recording studio would record a vintage Marshall 1960 cabinet through a Royer ribbon in this $1 million studio, and they would capture that impulse response, and you can send it via a download and play it through an IR loader, and it's like your amp rig is playing through that, and they're pretty impressive. They sound great. So this has got the full IR loader, all these different effects and stuff, but this is additionally it's got this looper, right? You push two buttons, but if you notice, it's got a full V drum setup here. So this is the only pro quality board that actually gives you full drum complement with different styles of playing. So you have, all sorts of crazy things. that are all built into it. So it's not just normal 8-beat one and, you know, shuffle and what. I mean, it actually has different styles, all sampled. I mean, this is kind of like, I don't know what you call it, prosumer. You know, I mean, it's way more advanced than just the last one we looked at, especially with things like IR loaders and all this kind of extremely high processing power and whatnot. But with the looper and the drums and all that kind of stuff on board, I mean, who do you think this is for? I mean, is this for just, I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts on this, you know, something like this? Like, who's the customer for this?
Yeah, well, Brad, you piqued my interest because I'm not even really familiar with this product, but I'm looking it up right now, and it looks pretty cool. But I am like dying laughing over here because I'm on their page right now for the G30. Yeah. And when it's talking about it says, you know, 8 microphones, 3 microphone positions, and then it says 8 decent guitar cabinets.
Well, you know, it's so funny because you have lost in translation. These guys have like zero marketing budget, you know. And
right.
Now here's the thing I thought was the coolest thing, especially being from someone in your generation. Okay, so you go to your global settings here. Now they don't even advertise this in the you know, rundown online. Go ahead and get back to my screen. Okay, so right here it says global setting. There's a thing that says game, and they build into this a video game called Snake. Okay.
Wow.
And basically, it's like you're this snake. It's got a joystick here. This is not just a wheel. It actually is a joystick. And you go around and you eat this fruit, I guess. Let me see if I can do this right. Is that right? Okay. And then when you eat the fruit, you get a little bit longer. Okay?
I remember that game.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm like going, it's got a full color little arcade game built in. What am I doing? No, I can't even eat this dumb thing. Oh, I lost.
Well, anyways, we actually got another YouTube comment. Chad Hughes
entertaining one of these multi-effects, especially if you're running straight to a line level system. You know, a lot of these, you know, some of these effects, like especially the older ones, like the Line 6 HD 500, which you referenced earlier, the RP 500, they all had stereo balanced XLR outs, but a lot of the newer ones, like these new X pedals, the Helix, the HX Stomp, I think the Helix may, the HX Stomp doesn't. They don't have balanced XLR outs, but that's really eventually where you need to get to. So what does a guitar player do if you're showing up to a show? Yeah, what does a guitar player do if you're showing up to a show and you're using one of these pedals? What kind of do you need a special extension, or do you bring your own direct box, or what do you do?
You know what I always did was I literally just had a Whirlwind Imp 2. It was just kind of the industry standard of passive DI. I still got it somewhere. And honestly, it's inaudible as far as the difference. I mean, it's passive, so you're not getting that little boost. Anyways, you said you had another YouTube comment. Go ahead.
Chad Hughes said, you can only play along with tapes/CDs before it gets old.
This is very true. Absolutely. You can't play with... Because the other thing, too, about playing with tapes and CDs, especially if you're an old guy like me trying to learn classic stuff, any of y'all who watched Get Back, if you actually invested the 6 hours or whatever to watch that on Disney Plus, I'm listening for different things. Did you know that they didn't have a tuner in there? They're all like, they're literally just doing the old 5th fret tuning. They're just playing by ear, spitballing it, okay? Now, this is the biggest band ever, and they're literally just kind of... So now, think about this from playing with CDs. If you sit down with your guitar and you're trying to learn a song from somebody recorded 40 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever, you're probably going to be out a little bit because they didn't have the same little chromatic tuner that you clip on the headstock that you have now. So you're right. I mean, just having, just playing along with CDs and tapes is only going to give you so long. Having something like this where you can create, you know, and I think that's what, you know, I guess, you know, we've talked almost an hour on this, and so we're going to have to kind of wrap it up a little bit. But I think really the point that I like about effect pedals, okay, especially multi-effects or individual effects or whatever, is that all of us as players are different, okay? You got the guys who are just starting. You got the guys who maybe are starting again after maybe laying out for 20, 30 or whatever years, okay? You've got the guys who want to bring everything out there in case someone yells, "Hey, play that, one song that is the only song that ever uses a blue box octaver pedal." Okay, so I better bring it just in case. The point is that, or you could be the guy who's got it so tightened up that he can bring just one or two, effects, if any, and know that it's going to be right. Okay, but the point is that there is something out there that's designed to spark your creative juices, to get you moving and shaking. And so when you come in and you look at multi-effect pedals, don't do what is so easy to do nowadays and go, "Well, I read on the internet that I shouldn't get a multi-effect pedal." You're going, huh? From a stranger that statistically speaking you'll never meet, and he has no clue what you're doing. You have to determine for yourself, is this a good fit for what I'm doing? And will this spark, my craft? Will this make me better than I am? One little thing I also wanted to say is that this being a multi-effect pedal and this MG30 being a multi-effect pedal, does it mean that you cannot use this with other pedals? Absolutely not. On the back, they actually encourage you using an effects loop to integrate your individual effects pedals into the multi-effect pedal. So you could say, "Dude, nothing's going to replace my TS9 tube screamer." That's great. Don't get rid of your TS9. Use it along with a tool that will give you everything else that tube screamer doesn't have. Okay? So, that being said, I'm not going to say this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, because only you know what's going to work for you. Okay? And just know that we are in the business of trying to connect the right tools to better your craft.
We got one more comment.
So, got another comment.
From Tommy Hazy.
Oh, okay. So we have a comment from Tommy. He says, "Love it. I had a multi-effect pedal. Agreed, it is a tool. I found it had pros and cons. For example, a crybaby effect on one is not the same as a crybaby pedal on its own." You know what? That's true. And see, that's the point, is that you can find what it does well and what it doesn't well, and then try to craft it to do what it is that you want to do. Hey, I want to thank you guys so much for commenting. Matt, I want to thank you for joining in. And I want to encourage both Matt and all y'all who haven't done so already to make sure you go and like Mainstage Music on Facebook. I noticed. Okay, because then you can see live streams and see content and converse with us and do all that kind of stuff, and that way you get updates on what's coming in, what's going out, and it's easy to find out special hours and things of that nature. Definitely share the video with anyone who you think would be into it, and definitely check us out next week, same bat time, same bat channel, when we'll be talking about some other engaging topic. But until then, you be safe and fun, and we'll just see you next week.